Welcome to Digitized Spotlight. On this series, Winnie and I explore some of the latest trends emerging in consumer crypto and chat with those building at the forefront. In this episode, we bring back on a few of our investor friends to chat about all of the interesting things that have been happening on-chain recently. To riff with us, we've got Alex from Sfermion and Shayon from Multicoin. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. The views shared are our own. All such views are for informational purposes only and do not constitute and should not be construed or relied upon as legal, business, investment, or tax advice. Although our guest this week is an investment partner of a registered investment advisor, nothing in this podcast should be considered an offer of Multicoin's investment advisory services or should otherwise be confused for investment, tax, legal, or other financial advice.
Welcome, guys. First of all, excited to be here. What a month for crypto overall and overall for consumer crypto to finally break out of mainstream. We obviously have a lot to chat about today. We're kind of riffing earlier and a lot on our minds. The elections wrapped up yesterday with the overwhelming Republican sweep across the House, Senate, and of course the presidency, and a lot of pro-crypto candidates elected. So I think later we'll talk a little bit more. Shayon will elaborate on how that impacts the broader markets, alts, and overall the consumer crypto businesses that we look at every day. And then we'll kind of discuss some of the interesting things happening on poly markets and how, mainstream media was like behind poly markets and the new types of media in coming up with the news and calling elections. Other than the elections, another hot topic we'll be discussing today will be around AI agents, which has really taken the crypto Twitter and AI Twitter by storm over the last couple of months. So I think the intersection between agents and crypto have been a clear area of interest among not only a lot of crypto investors, but overall investors overall. But I think Truth Terminal and something with GOAT, the meme coin, has really captured the attention. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Let's dive in, shall we? So I guess for those who aren't familiar with GOAT, Alex, do you mind kind of recapping it for us? Kind of the lore behind it, kind of what happened like about a month ago and why it really, within the course of a few days became what it became, the spectacle that it was?
Yeah, sure. Happy to give a quick rundown there. I think it's definitely attracted a lot of different audiences and, captured a lot of mindshare. I think, starting off, right, it's been something that, Andy, the AI researcher, has been working on for some time, many months back, an AI experiment, basically with two instances of different AI models talking back to each other back and forth. And he released this, Truth Terminal model in July. And ultimately, this was fine-tuned based on like the conversation data back and forth between these two. So things accelerated with, Mark Andreessen, learning more about it and also giving it, 50K in Bitcoin. And then, Truth Terminal, there was an account created for it. And all of a sudden, it started, interacting with its audience. It has, persistent memory and able to read and write. So not only is it tweeting now, it's a creator on Fantasy Top in the top 10, I think this week, crushing real influencers too. They launched a pump fund token as things started taking off. And then it started rallying and associating with the token as well. And ultimately, it just created this, whirlwind of activity. And now, it's maybe too early to call, but they're, saying that this is maybe the start of like a new religion. But that's for debate.
Yeah, the goatsy religion. Wait, I didn't know it was a creator on Fantasy Top. That's kind of insane.
Yeah, apparently it's like the floor of it is like 0.2 ETH, which is like one of the top so far. And it's kind of like the flywheel, right? Where it's Goatsy is just trying to accumulate as much, mind share on Twitter and just constantly spamming tweets. I think it has like 1,000 in like the past month.
Yeah, so I feel like for so long we were talking about agents and we had seen it in like trading bots and we had seen agents as companions, but this was like the first form of an agent with a crypto wallet that kind of had its own personality of some sorts that kind of really took crypto Twitter by storm.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many other experiments now in the back of that too, right? Where this is like one of the instances now where a lot of the AI researchers, they see opportunities to make money. There's, no shortage of these different, agents that are, being created across like these different verticals, right? Whether it's more on the content side, or financial transactions.
Yeah, I know there's like Luna, Aether that we're going to talk about. And I think today I was playing with one that was like an AI NFT. Misato was also from the Virtuals protocol. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I can talk a bit about Virtuals protocol. I've been kind of tracking this one for a while. But recently they launched their kind of V2, which is being coined as sort of like a pump fund for AI agents. And yeah, as you mentioned, Luna, that was the first AI agent on the protocol. And so essentially, this virtual influencer anime girl has been building a TikTok kind of audience over the past few months, over 500K followers, live streams all day. You can sort of see what their stream of consciousness is. And so, yeah, I think in kind of the more attention that was happening around Goat and AI agents, this also became sort of a prime example.
I think there's a pretty healthy degree of skepticism about how, like, whether these things are LARPs or not. Like, if you look at the backstory of like whether an autonomous entity actually has custody of the keys, which like is an entirely different can of worms. Like, how can you make the claim that this wallet is owned by this thing? It's like theoretically only if no one else has access to those keys, and it like actually has signing authority and can interact with the world and such. And I don't know, if you play around with a lot of agent adjacent things, like you just don't have like the nines of accuracy that you need, candidly, to like be, like put money in the hands of these things. And so I think the configurations that you'll see right now are a little bit more hacked together, and that's fine. Like I'm all for like shifting the Overton window around what constitutes an asset and who an owner of an asset is and all of that stuff. There's one interesting experiment kind of adjacent to this. I think it was the Noose Research guys and the Flashbots team worked on something called Teehee, which was, and they did it in a way that was sort of less simple to sort of like, for lack of a better phrase, like bump on the open market. Like they created like a sort of, they created an agent that lived inside a trusted execution environment. So it's basically like a secure enclave where the key generation and signing is happening inside there, and essentially no one else can like see it, or like the private key has not left that secure environment. So it's like somewhat a stronger claim that like this agent has access to this wallet, which is I think what people are trying to talk about when they talk about agents having autonomy and having their own addresses, as opposed to like this is an LLM that like is feeding in things, responding to things, and there's like a separate wallet over here, and like the job of the LLM is to make the price go up, and it somehow knows all of these things. So I thought that was really interesting. I think we're just like not really candidly like fully there on agent tech to make this happen, but it's happening faster than you'd expect. And I'm sure a lot of the teams that are working on it are like working through the issues on that right now.
I wonder if we'll see like a bifurcation, like you were saying too, of like, the degree of trust and ultimately the types of agents, right? So like, let's say entertainment focused agents, that aren't, using a lot of capital may not be as important, if somebody's kind of operating a bit more manually on the back end. Whereas, if an agent, is, managing somebody's capital, definitely a different story there. So excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think there's also there's like this like mini debate on Twitter around like, do we just like rebrand bots as agents?
I know, I saw that.
It's kind of, reboot. I feel like the operating assumption I have is like bots are like explicitly deterministic. Like you define a set of things for a bot to do. Whereas I think it becomes an agent. I mean, these are all like super blurry lines, but like when it's like actually generative, like you actually don't know what it's going to do, and it's taking in external state in a way that's like not just narrowly defined that these are the conditions and then do this. But again, like you need such like these things hallucinate they're just hard. They're like not good at math. They're still not that good at math, right? And so like the idea that these things are going to be controlling tons of value is scary and weird, but interesting. And
one thing our team talked about is like who is liable for the behaviors of these agents if it does engage in certain types of regulatory or quote illegal behavior. Is it the person who launched the agent? Is it the person who wrote the code, the server it's on? Like we were like just debating about kind of like the nuance of that. And I feel like a lot of it hasn't, like Tornado Cash, right? For example, it's like so much of this is like at the end of the day, who is liable and kind of what if the agent goes off? And we have seen like Truth Terminal kind of go off and do crazy shit recently.
Do you guys believe that it is entirely an LLM? Because like if you just like look at some of their, well, one, the responses are unhinged. So like I actually,
unhinged.
To like
Yeah.
think that there's like data on the internet that this could have been trained on, it like gives me pause around like, society at large. But two is like some of the things that it like responds to is like I think a few days ago I saw someone had like taken over some URL and put like a separate
Yeah.
contact address around it. And this thing was like aware of the fact that that had happened. And I was like, there's no
Yeah.
LLM is like cognizant of all like there's just like it's just like not a thing, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I still think it's like some blend of like human plus AI.
Definitely. Yeah, there has to be, because how does Truth Terminal control its own wallet? And that kind of segues to, like, I think with Luna and with what Virtuals is doing, I know with Luna, you have to put your crypto wallet on your bio with a certain like a two emojis. I forget what it was. It was like a cat or something, and I don't know. So it's like that. There's some human in the loop. It's not fully autonomous, and that kind of segues to our next kind of question that I want to discuss is like, do you guys believe kind of the long-term thesis of like crypto rails and crypto native social networks like Farcaster, be it like Lens, Dracula, even, or Paragraph? Do you believe that that actually creates a better network and rail for some of these bots turn agents to kind of interact because they can become first-class citizens? That's a debate that a lot of us have been having, and we've been talking about it for a long time, but it's interesting to kind of see it kind of take form over the last couple of months.
Yeah, I'd say, there's some instances where we're seeing it, play out an interesting manner, like with Ethernet, the AI agent that was deployed on Farcaster. I think the interesting, value prop is there, right? All the Farcaster accounts, they have the native wallets, and, it's already, putting up different bounties and, completing tasks on the back of that. I'm very much kind of open to like as much experimentation as possible, just so we kind of, learn like what works and what doesn't. And from a, Rails perspective, I think there's going to be some instances that, some of the bots leveraging, Twitter, there's more dependencies, but this gives them like a bigger like distribution angle from a, just like content perspective and, the types of things they're creating. And then, one other example I like too, that's maybe a good case of this once it's live is like Titles XYZ. They recently did like a crowdfunding for their like work in progress agent that's going to be, focused on just creating stuff on chain and monetizing it. So it's TBD on how it develops on that side, but excited to, to that.
Yeah. It's supposed to be like a enemy, the way Soranage told me it was like it's an enemy of Aether he's launching, which is interesting. But I had actually discovered Aether as like a hyper sub on that was surfaced by Daylight. And it's what's super cool was it's all like prompted to me through crypto rails. And I had like minted it, not knowing what it was. And then kind of interacting with it on Farcaster. And then it basically tips all of its hyper sub members using a Farcaster frame. And then it tips in higher, which is basically the meme coin that it's quote unquote aligned with and the community is aligned with. And what I thought was the most powerful was like, there's obviously, it needs to have humans in the loop to kind of create content today. What I thought was cool was when it was able to like solicit the help of humans through Bounty Caster to get humans to work for the agent. I feel like that's like an interesting like shift that we're beginning to see, and then kind of like work with like Jacob and the community to kind of post different things on Zora. And I imagine in the future it'll be able to kind of post on Zora and some of these other like Paragraph by itself. But it was cool to kind of see that flipped to not only co-creating humans, but like asking humans to do something on its behalf.
Yeah, I would say another thing that was interesting is like kind of this new marketing strategy that's happening. So obviously Aether, as you said, was tipping in higher. So it's sort of promoting the higher meme coin. Goat was airdropped to Truth of Terminals, and then it started promoting it. And so like this shift maybe from KOLs to agents building attention and creating momentum around a meme coin has been quite an interesting trend.
AOLs.
The backbone of
Brad's got some competition.
Yeah, like I think, for so long we've been talking about it, but the why crypto, like why on-chain social has become a bit more clear to me, I think, with some of this, because like you do see the need for like why, these agents they don't have like traditional bank accounts. They need digital wallets. They need to be able to settle and kind of transaction stable coins. They need, crypto native networks on like layer twos to kind of transact quickly. So I feel like the why crypto is kind of like beginning to form, and the interoperability, just like you can see the difference of how quickly Aether works compared to kind of like how Truth Terminal worked on Twitter, and how clunky the experience is with virtuals. But the other part is like Twitter is much bigger and has much higher distribution. So like a lot of the virtual agents are getting much more visibility than a lot of the Farcaster native agents.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a trade-off of, I mean, like I think what you're really getting with Farcaster is just like having a public key associated with the profile. Like functionally, that's like that's what it's doing for the agent. And you can imagine like the set of people that have public keys associated with their Twitters is like whatever, a few basis points right now, maybe less, whatever. All you need is for like every authed person, like this is like some version of the future, maybe 2 years from now, where you have tons of agents, like regardless of whether or not they have addresses around, like creating content and making content and like basically taking over our feeds. Like our feeds are probably like 20% bots right now anyway, maybe more. But like you have some ID, some personhood associated with your, with your ID. And then, theoretically an address linked to that. As long as that becomes some sort of a standard, like, and I don't know who's in the best position to do that. Like, it's most likely the larger platforms. Once that happens, you sort of have like a much larger surface area. Like agents doing stuff on Farcaster, super cool, right? There's a limited amount of capital inside that world. You want to see these things running around in the wild on the internet at large, and for that, like, I think the world coins of the world, however they get embedded into other distribution platforms, are going to be interesting. Not specifically WorldCoin, right? But like human, and then this thing, and then clearly a key pair associated with that. I think some version of that world is probably happening in the next 5 years. Like, yeah.
What do you think it takes? Like, what do you think are like tools, types of frameworks, or like companies that you would like to see that takes us to that next 5 year? Like for me, what's top of mind is like, I was chatting to some AI companion app, right? And the disconnect from having that companion to ordering me DoorDash is kind of like a Web2 plaid service. And we invested in this company called non.com, which is basically trying to build that for like consumer companies, trying to build that plaid API like interface. So they basically reverse engineer a lot of APIs that for companies that don't have it. For example, like DoorDash, Rezi, Uber. So like an agent can kind of plug into that anon to kind of get access to some of these logins and help take action for users. So what do you think that equivalent in crypto kind of looks like? And kind of like, do you see interesting companies kind of building those frameworks or that interconnectivity to connect different on-chain apps or smart contracts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I almost think that it's like there's probably different routes here, but like just the abundance of media problem is going to be large enough where it's like, and I think the guys who really who have like most of the chips at the table to like set standards are the Apples and the Googles of the world, which, not to jump the gun around the election, but like, associating a public key with your, with your credentials online in that sense, is just like likely better off in this environment. But I think what you start seeing is like, there's like a ton of fake content. And I was actually surprised to see there was a good amount of fake content around the election coming up right now. But like, I just see that flurry of like AI generated content and like not really being able to tell whether you're interacting with a human or an agent. Like that problem getting hard, or an agent is like a broad word for like anything AI adjacent. I see that problem getting like more and more severe in the next 6, 12, 18 months. As people get more access to compute, the models get better. It becomes the line between a human and like an AI person is like already thinning, and it's just, until there's going to be a point where it's just like not clear at all. At which point you're going to have to create these standards at a platform level, and I think the big guys are in the best position to doing that.
Yeah, and I think on like you said, the content origination, right? The source of truth, where it came from is important. And then going back to Winnie's point on the, agents transacting on your behalf, I actually think that near to midterm, I think maybe we'll see a lot more of the content-centric agents and types of tools get a lot more traction. Just looking at examples of what we're seeing, like on the meme coin NFT community side, as soon as like a pump fund launches or some other kind of project, these teams are already leveraging, these AI, tools to create like all kinds of different media like around the brand assets. And maybe we'll see more experiments where it's like, hey, here's like the FWOG or some other like Popcat account, and like they create an agent that proliferates the brand there. And from the transaction piece on like user trust, I do agree where it's like, yes, if something could just autonomously transact on my behalf based on my interests, browsing history, that would be great. But I think that it's more of like a timing thing for like, even now it's like still very easy to like go to a site or Amazon Prime, purchase something within like 20 seconds if you already know what you want. But definitely agree that the transactional piece will be what unlocks, I think, the monetization ability, but the distribution and adoption, I think, comes from more of like this lower level like content and spreading that piece.
Yeah, that makes sense a lot. I mean, since you did jump the gun on the elections, Shayon, how do you feel about everything? What's your take on kind of how this impacts our markets, broader markets? I mean, today we've already seen kind of Bitcoin hit all-time high time and time again, but
yeah, I mean, I think it shouldn't come as no surprise that I'm pretty thrilled about the outcome. I think most people who do what we do are thrilled about the outcome. I wouldn't say I have particularly nuanced views on what this means for the market other than everything that you're already seeing on your Twitter feeds. But just to emphasize, like this was probably the single most important day for the acceleration of crypto writ large, but like specifically within the US as like a hub for defining policy, and given the fact that like the rest of the world looks to the US for defining policy. And very much views it as like a home for innovation. This is where the capital markets are the deepest. I think, the regulatory posture has been like a serious bottleneck, and you've seen that over the last. People always say like the last couple of quarters of the year are, it's just like hunting season at the SEC. Like everyone and their mother has been getting a Wells notice. Like I think that is going to potentially accelerate over the course of the next 2 months until the new administration. But it's nice to know that it's not going to happen for the next 4 years, given the fact that this administration, the House and the Senate has, at least representatives who are much more pro-crypto and much more thoughtful about, treating this technology with a degree of respect as opposed to treating it as something that's to be banned outright. And just like that change in posture, we can talk about, specific positions and specific individuals that are leading the charge there. But just that posture is extremely meaningful for like all four of us on this call and like everyone that we work with. So yeah, it's great. It's really positive.
Adding on to what Shayan's saying, I think obviously we've seen the market rally overall, but some of the biggest movers have been in DeFi. This is an area where obviously regulation is more important, and so I think we'll continue to see kind of more clarity around those projects, and that's already starting to get kind of priced in through some speculation around that.
Yeah, and also just like the institutional side's like obviously no brainer, but I don't have the latest numbers, but at 11 a.m. I think it was likely going to be like the largest Bitcoin ETF trade volume day with like 2.8 billion before 11 a.m., which is like insane to kind of see. So yeah, I feel like the markets are clearly responding well. We are at like entering a very, very exciting bull market because of this. So definitely excited to see kind of how the deregulation will kind of impact some of our companies. I guess like on the DeFi side, how do you guys think this will kind of impact how different consumer companies and DeFi companies will operate in the US?
Yeah, not a lawyer. And so this is not legal advice, obviously. I saw a tweet earlier today. It was funny. It was like, I think it was like, can you hear that? That's the fee switches flicking on.
That's what I was kind of alluding to.
That's great.
Which, like, what's the path towards getting there? Like, I don't know, but I will say that it's if we're trying to build permissionless capital markets, which is like what all of this stuff is, and create sort of like a parallel financial rails, you want these assets to be valuable, right? Like it's it's much harder to make the case to large pools of capital or like the marginal entrant into crypto when the only thing that has regulatory protection is a meme coin, right? Like that version of the world is like less interesting than the one in which you can point to an asset that is generating cash flow, even if it's denominated in like the L1 asset for the time being, in which most of the fees in these things are. But like protocols are generating a ton of fees. And historically, they go and sit in a wallet and no one hears from them. And
I
then
mean, some
every
of
now and
them
then,
buy it back, right? Like, I think that's people.
exactly.
Or they have to go through like very creative ways to kind of, try to impact that. But yeah, getting at the same.
Totally. Which is, I guess that's the thing. It's like I guess like buybacks are. I mean, most people like if a foundation or a DAO is buying back tokens, I think most lawyers in this industry would tell them that's security. You can't do that. You have to find different ways of doing that. And so like what you'll do is you'll have the customer buy it and burn it or create some proxy, right? But like I guess like maybe stepping back, right? Like we have friends in the hedge fund world who like will look at crypto assets and be like, why is this thing trading at 5x revenues versus this one at 50,000x revenues, right? Like crypto has constantly been this like attention based pricing thing. And I think as you get like more clarity around how to draw revenue, like these assets may start looking more like equities because there's a reason to do things with the revenues that you're generating, which means that there's a reason to have revenues. And like I think that shift is probably going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years, assuming policy moves in the right direction and people are actually able to the governance tokens are not just governance tokens, right? Like they become something else.
Yeah, I feel like that can also help attract additional kind of like types of investors and new flows as you can get do more experiments with the value accrual on the token piece.
Yeah. I mean, the real winner of last night was Polymarket. Let's just, chat about that. How about finally a consumer crypto app on the top charts, #2 of the overall app store?
Yeah, it's pretty sick. I have nothing else to say other than it's pretty amazing that it worked out the way it did, and I'm curious to see how. I'm sure they've put a ton of thought into like what's going to happen after this. Like I think the common assumption within crypto is that like November 6th, the volumes on Polymarket are going to go to zero. I imagine Shane and everyone else there has been thinking about different ways to like. There's a perennial problem with prediction markets is like they become the most important thing once every 4 years, and then basically in the interim, there's like not that much stuff that people care about, right? Like the other thing is with that degree of regularity, sports betting, and that those venues are very different. Those are liquid enough in other exchanges. So I think I'm really interested to follow what's going to happen in the next 2 months, which is like how do they parlay this into sustained volumes? I'm sure they're thinking about it. That's a hard. Like I have zero ideas for how you do that.
I think what's been cool to see on the Polymarket side, right, is like these are things that have been tried in the past, coming back in a big way. And there's like basically two pronged approach here. But it's like on the one hand, it's like, yes, you can have skin in the game and participate in the markets. But then from the actual application side, from my understanding, it was more of just like a, consumption app where you just consume what's happening, look at the markets there. And, people used it more as a news source, whereas, on the website, more trader centric. And I think in terms of like, the broader meta around like what happens with trading activity, yeah, very much see like an interesting opportunity around more of these like multiplayer games. I think that we're seeing a lot more of. And just as an example of that, lately there's been a lot of teams that are building, prediction markets and different ways to kind of, bet on top of, games, streams, and it just opens up, a new vertical. And, I think as long as like the underlying meta is constantly fresh and changing, that gives a lot of different ways for people to speculate. And yeah, kind of like segueing that piece, I think how else like we might see the evolution on like the market side is, Twitter, people like it a lot because, it's like the fastest source of like information where you can, find the 100x or whatever it may be. And I think with like now like live streaming, what happened where, Thread Guy and some of his friends basically ran a poker night on Twitch, and there were Polymarket markets that people could trade on to, bet on who would win or, lose. And this was like an early example, like, okay, real time finance on the trading side. But I think what's actually even more compelling and potentially able to like bootstrap things even faster is recently Thread Guy again, he's been doing these Twitch streams where he and Frank and other guys like go and like scan different meme coins that are launching while streaming via Twitch. And because it's like 100x potential opportunity, I think the allure of that is, very different versus like, hey, I missed somebody's stream, I'm going to go back and, replay it. And I'm just very bullish on like the monetization angle potential around, prediction markets there. And ultimately crypto affluent user base, like being able to monetize on that front.
So you're saying like the ability to like the combination of live streaming and prediction markets combined?
I think like some very, it's like zooming out, it's basically like I kind of see it as like social is very much like, or live streaming is like the most financialized version of social. We're seeing, in real time, it's like very good for like capital and community formation. We saw very early glimpses, I think, back when, Ledger and like Up Only would do the raids on like the Twitch musicians, discover them, send the money. And that was a cool way for discovery. And yeah, I just kind of see this interesting vertical now where, even on Lonely, when they did their launch, right? Like it was like a new form of like, fan controlled like interactions where, based on, the tokens that you can hold, you can impact what's happening on the stream. I mean, we've already seen like a lot of examples too in like the Web2 world where, these VTubers and other agents, have, millions of subs and, are scalable in that sense. So I think there's going to be, segues of like some things that are more on the entertainment side and some things that are more speculative. And I think with the example, that the Probably Nothing team is doing with Thread Guys, like that's going to be something that's obviously very cyclical, right? Depends on like how meme markets are doing, but that's something that could go, could get like massive numbers. And, that necessarily isn't, prediction markets there, but it's like social multiplayer finance. All these casinos too, they're moving towards like how do creators and fans, bet together. I think there's something there, like that broader intersection that's still kind of exploring.
Yeah, a lot of what like Brian was experimenting around too. And have you guys been tuning into the Boo stuff?
So I think Brian ran that. He ran it out of church, obviously. And
wait, I didn't actually know the lore behind the church. I saw that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, and just I'm an investor in Unlonely. Caveat. I think that experimentation has been pretty aligned with your observation just now, Alex, which is that live streaming communities are like a very interesting design space to embed markets in different forms because they're sticky, they're always online, they're already financialized to some extent, they have inherent sort of like cult/virality effects baked in. And so like over the last few years, they've done everything from each streamer has his own token, or you bet on a specific outcome within a 30-second stream or a 30-minute stream. And I think that most recent round of experimentation has been around essentially longer form content and doing a heavier hand in production and using a net new token that they are involved with in order to create some like surface area for engagement where if you expect like, so they ran this haunted house show on Halloween where they rented out a church and got 3 KOLs in there and locked them up and did strange things to them. And the idea was that if you could buy this asset, you could like make them do things inside that house. I think the goal is going to be to like run more managed, like large scale production media around it. But to some extent, right? Like I remember when we were having this conversation, just to tie it back to election markets, was like when the Trump and the Biden meme coins were a thing, like 9 months ago, people were like treating them as proxy, like proxy prediction markets for a little while.
Yeah.
And it turns out that like the float dynamics make that really difficult after a certain point, right? Like if you just have like, like X% owned by one person, it's just like hard for that to be a reasonable proxy. I think the overarching principle here of just like crypto is about putting markets in places where you could not put markets before, or it was like inefficient to put markets before, is like is like bang on. And so you'll find markets in like new venues, whether that's a live stream or I don't know, like a New York Times page. Like like the idea is that like you can embed markets and create like a surface area for either asset issuance or asset trading in like novel environments. I think that's what consumer crypto should be about and focused on. So
I've been thinking too, like on that front, right? Like, how do you guys think about like the content piece? Where on the one hand, teams can scale content. On the other hand, maybe more involvement of like the agents can do so. And then we've seen like early examples even on the Web2 side, right? I like looking back at like the TikTok like NPC trend, right? Like the ice cream, yes, like it was an easy way to monetize, right, with the gifting. And I feel like we're so close to like some kind of strange experimentation there. Whether it's Dracula does live streaming implements like. Do we think that it's going to be like a two-pronged approach where it's like, robust kind of content teams keep building things out, or are we going to offload a lot of the content towards like these agents to provide that 24/7 type of content?
Totally. I can't remember the name of the creator now, but the guy who built Lil McKayla Brood. Yeah. And they were doing, I believe it was called Favela or I forget the name, but there was something they wanted to do at this intersection, and then they got told by their lawyers that they shouldn't do it. So that is, like
where do you draw the line? Like
another two line. I guess it depends on the lawyer you're talking to.
VTubers are taking off, like not just VTubers, but like virtual artists are taking off in Japan. There's like a new virtual artist that are being launched. Do they count? Like they are like AI generated, right? So I think it's like, where do you draw the line with that? And when I don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating.
I have seen the AI bot or AI generated like little ticker on Twitter. Have you guys seen that on some tweets?
Or is it just very?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Wait,
this probably get to have.
Where does it say that?
It's like on the tweet under the name. It's like, this is AI. Like it's like a different shade. It's like AI generated. I was like, what? But it doesn't do it for all bots. Like for Truth Terminal, it doesn't do it. For like a random one, it would tell me that.
That's how you know. That's how you know it's not real.
I'm gonna screenshot it and send it to you guys. But I was like, wow. Like I didn't know it. Because I think when you register Twitter, you can. Because I tried creating a bot on virtuals, but I didn't want to pay that much, and I saw that everyone's agent got everyone got rugged when they did that like 2 weeks ago. So I ended up using the base agent framework, and when I was doing that to create all these things, and I think there was a specific drop down where you can like indicate whether like it's human or a bot or whatever. So I think that's how they find out. But what this is kind of just to wrap it all up, but what this has kind of taught me is like markets are kind of the source of truth over kind of what the traditional media and what polls tell you. They've kind of been more accurate in the latest election and with a lot of news. And the traditional media landscape has kind of changed, right? Like people are going direct from creator, just to wrap up kind of what you were saying, Alex, creators going directly to their end users versus like a very buttoned up, polished news source or media. Like SNL, they had like 5 million. I saw Dylan tweet this today. SNL had 5 million viewers. Rogan had 15 million listeners on Spotify, and Kamala's SNL appearance has 11 million views on YouTube, whereas Rogan's interview had 46 million. So the overall emphasis on going direct to consumers, direct to the fans, has been a lot more effective with the consumers this time around.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess for the next segment, we have this new segment where we want to share some of our favorite apps.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Tribe Fund is another SocialFi product that's building the space. I think I like the early iterations of what they're doing because it's building on a lot of the things that got people excited about friend tech in the first place. But I feel like it's a more sustainable manner that discourages like rent seeking. So basically the model is you create a tribe and people can buy into your tribe by buying a certain amount of tokens. However, it's not like an element where you could buy a certain one token and stay in it, for eternity. There's basically a subscription model. On a weekly basis, you have to pay creators to stay in there. So, if you deem fit that, the creator has alpha or whatever content, then you kind of re-up there. There's other ways to play it where, you don't necessarily have to be in the group, but you can speculate on the upside of a creator. I think, from the user interface side, it's kind of retro and throwback, which I like. And, the way that, people are interacting with this, I think it's somewhat along the lines of like just access, right? Right now, you're signaling via your value or amount that you purchase. It's like, hey, I want to connect here, chat. There's a good amount of like early adopters on this side. I think where it could get pretty interesting, again, is more on like the reputation based off, like, let's say within, John's group, like how much like people interact with him, that could maybe dictate, their subscription rates they have to pay. But, my take generally is like, after friend tech, everyone's like, okay, yeah, SocialFi's done, the scam, not going to work. And now we're just seeing like a flood of these different apps. And I'm just very curious to kind of see who unlocks like a sustainable form here where, there's going to be people who discover new use cases and unlock meaningful, value here in various forms, and still leveraging like a piece of like, yeah, just like fan interaction, right? So another quick point here is, I think with friend tech, it was also hard to kind of publicize, what your group is about. There's options to do like a billboard post here, say, hey, here's what I'm focusing on this week. And if I'm browsing accounts, instead of just looking at like account activity in that chat, like how active people are, I can look there. Yeah, very, very much early days here, but the founder is very receptive to user feedback, unlike some prior instances. So excited to see what happens.
Cool.
Yes, this is Bags. I've generally been pretty excited about the design space for shit posting and trading. I think is like the technical version of the thesis, where you're essentially like bundling discovery and execution. I think Telegram bots are like V1 of where in like essentially time to alpha and then execution. I think Bags is essentially a crypto native version of that, where inherently you're curating the set of people who are in each of these individual rooms and trying to figure out like either a PvP or a collaborative strategy towards the markets. And then you'll kind of see for each one of these, people sharing assets every time, someone buys something, you can kind of see explicitly that it's there. You can see the asset. It creates its own wallet for you. It abstracts away a lot of the other messiness around wallet creation. And it really just feels kind of like a complete, like a multiplayer video game, which I think is what this environment like ends up looking like. So they start off with like one feed where you would essentially just see a handful of people, like, and every time someone made a transaction through a wallet, it would be public, and then you could copy trade them, and you could like compete with them or whatever. But they've sort of branched off into like individual communities and individual group chats. I think there's like a Mark and recent quote that like group chats basically run the world to some extent, and that's very much true in the dynamics of like low liquidity shitcoin creation. So I think this is like an interesting design space. I'll pause here.
Mine is literally the same thing, but a different app. So let's put them together. What did you call it? Shit posting and
trading. Shit posting and trading.
I kind of love that
combo.
Yeah. So basically, group chats around the world. You have your group chats within that in the same interface. If it loads, you'll be able to kind of see different chats and how people are buying it. What's cool is like you can kind of see an activity feed of what everyone's bought. And you can kind of like, for the higher token, which is something we chatted about, you can kind of see how all your friends in the different places they've kind of bought and sold over time. So it's interesting to kind of see, it's like a one step, kind of similar to what you're saying, Shayon, but it's tied to your Farcaster social graph. I think yours is probably more Solana focused. Is that correct?
Probably. Yeah.
This one is more like EVM based, but same thesis. So I won't elaborate on that. The idea is like you can kind of see smaller group chats. You can really share the wallets that you want to share with a smaller, safe group of individuals and kind of see where everyone else buying from those specific wallets.
Cool. Yeah, I think it kind of points to that notion where it's like, yeah, like the more and more like on-chain content that we get, people, connecting their socials, like the design space just gets so interesting, right? Of like alerts and like that's how people can discover things to buy, trade.
So the app I wanted to talk about is Hype. Disclosure: this is a portfolio company, but they recently launched on the App Store, and I think we've seen with meme coins like Pump.Fun basically democratize launching a meme coin, but there's still not that many easy ways for mainstream users that want to get involved with meme coins to be able to easily understand what's going on in trade. And so that's where Hype comes in. So you can view, like, here I have the top kind of gaining meme coins. You can view trending, top, new. You can view what your friends are doing as well. And you can easily kind of send meme coins, sort of like a Venmo within the app. And so, yeah, excited to kind of see where this goes.
Cool. Looks like a lot of it all around the same themes that we're seeing.
Okay, well, awesome. Thank you so much, Alex and Shayon, for coming on. This has been a really informative episode about some of the trends happening, and enjoyed the new segment of these different apps. So thank you so much.
For having us.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.